and then you can control your response.
You can control your response, right?
Oh, you want to piss me off? Oh, then I'm not going to get pissed off.
Yeah, because you have a set of tools. And it's like you may want to take a swing at me. You may want to attack me. It's like, okay, fine. I need to go from logic. Now I go to jujitsu. Now I have this whole set of techniques, right? But in no case do I get emotional.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hands-On Logos podcast. This is where we discuss current events, personal growth, and any other random topic that crosses our minds. Our goal is to have a meaningful discussion that help us to see the topics we discuss more clearly. Our hope is we can help you expand your self-awareness, develop your critical thinking, and learn to be less reactive to the world around you. And most importantly, remember, be curious. If you like what you hear, like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any feedback, please leave a comment. We want to hear what you think. We appreciate you.
Boom, we're live, Chris. Live on this Friday.
Are we really live?
We're live. This is about as live as it gets, man. We're
All right.
talking to each other live. And this is
live is one of those words that has lots of meaning. So, okay, we're live. All right.
It has lots of meaning. Yes, right. Hey, so I just wanted to maybe do a small little thing today.
Oh,
I'd like to use logic to prove the existence of God.
All righty.
Just a small little task, you know.
Yeah, you must be the first one to try that.
The first one. And then, if we have some time, we should try to build an argument using logic to disprove God.
It's gonna even that. Actually, I think even that's hard to do.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. Well, okay, we can try that. I was thinking we should start with a joke, but I don't have any jokes to start with.
Well, we could do a joke. I got a joke.
All right. Tell me your joke.
So a man was talking to God, and he was talking about his wife, and he goes, God, you made my wife so beautiful, but why did you have to make her so dumb? And God replied back and said, well, I made her beautiful so you'd love her, and I made her dumb so she'd love you. I mean,
you've told that one before, actually.
That's the only joke I got, Chris. I'm a one and done guy. That's it.
No, I actually in Toastmasters today, the dad jokes were pretty funny. I thought so.
Yeah, that is good. Table topics was pretty darn good today, actually.
It was
quite amazing.
You were funny.
Okay. I was funny.
Your table topics was great.
I just launch off on some random nonsense or whatever. But you know, it does. In some ways, I was a little bit serious because people have this thing that they like to do. They want to personify other objects.
Personify, yeah.
So it's like my wife wants to believe that the cat loves her, and I mean, maybe, but if the cat doesn't love her the same way that she loves the cat, actually. Because basically the cat does a lot of stuff because he gets like food and attention, and it's kind of about the cat, you know?
Yes. We anthropomorphize, I think that's the word they use when you take an animal and you give it human characteristics.
I think that's an object, right? And give it human characteristics.
I don't think it's just physical. I think it could be mental as well. But anyway, yeah, we take an animal, or we take something, and we portray it, human emotion, human feelings, and we on it, right? And like a puppy dog has sad eyes, but does that mean they're sad? I mean, just because you have sad eyes, you know?
I don't know. I saw that when I don't know if you know. I'm sure you know this company called Boston Dynamics or whatever. They build robots, I believe.
Oh yeah. It's been around years, yeah.
And so there was a woman that was trying to push this robot dog over, and it's like, kick it harder, kick it hard. And she was like having a real hard time kicking this because it would look so much like it. She's like, I can't do it. And the guy's like, it's just a machine, right? It doesn't feel anything.
Yep.
I doubt if you're going to break it, but he said, look, if you break it, we'll fix it, right? It won't be a problem. So it's just, it's crazy, actually.
Well, I mean, it shows you the limit of the human mind. No matter what you know, your mindset's still there.
Yeah, because and I think that's really good for us because that's what do they call it? Neurons, whatever match something to like we connect with each other. So that's why we get along sometimes because we can internalize how the other person is probably feeling, and that's how we feel about
Oh
things.
yeah, our
What do
our
they call it?
ability to see ourselves or others in ourselves, ourselves in others, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Okay,
it's
so let's
also
go to this. Sorry, go
because
ahead.
it's also one of the problems where people assume the way you think is the way others think, and we get
Wow,
into
that's
that problem
always
all the time culturally, right? Where cultures and background don't mix, and you're
yeah.
attributing certain beliefs and ideas on someone else that aren't there.
It's just not there. Yeah, exactly. I remember watching the Star Trek episode. It was the one with T'Pol, whatever her name is, the Vulcan chick, actually.
Uh huh.
Um, and I think her and Trip were down on a planet, and it was different cultures, and so she was trying to coach him because this is the first time he's ever, really ever been around aliens, and then he was getting all upset because this one woman was like taking this mask off of a baby and was totally having trouble breathing, and he tried to go and interrupt it, and Paul's like, "Stop it!" Right? What she's doing is she's training. It's like it's part of the process. She's doing something good for him but in his mind, she's like, "Oh my God, just harming this baby or whatever." He had just no idea.
I think that's a huge part of the problem we've got is if you assume that your vision of the world is the way the rest of the world thinks, you're going to have a hard time when reality hits.
Well, our other people are going to have a hard time because you're going to try to force your reality onto them.
I mean, that's where I think a lot of the political infighting comes into play. You think that the way you see the world is the way everyone should see the world, and that's not the way it is.
Oh my gosh, yeah, yeah. No, that's exactly right. So any part of this program, we need people at least just to pause, just to think. Okay, hang on, wait a minute. Maybe I understand that that is offensive to me, and I hate that. But maybe they're not a horrible person, right? Maybe they're trying actually doing something good.
I thought it was interesting when we posed the question to Andrew earlier today about how to get people to not react emotionally or
Yeah,
to or let emotions overcome them. His first thought was, "You've got to let them have their emotions."
yeah,
So I wasn't thinking in a two-person conversation. I was thinking one person just reacting to something they hear. But he's assuming a two-person conversation. He goes, "You've got to let the other person have their emotions. Let them have their emotions. Right?
yeah,
You can't
yeah,
control that."
yeah. Because I think he's probably doing counseling
Well,
for
from a therapy
couples.
perspective, yeah, you can't interrupt their. If someone feels sad, they're not wrong. They feel sad.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. Now you can argue maybe they shouldn't feel sad and you shouldn't do that. I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe, but I
Yeah,
do.
that's a conversation. That's getting them to reframe things in their mind, all that sort of thing. But I mean, if you feel sad, you are sad. That's it. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, okay, so let's talk about God for a second.
Okay, let's go.
So I got a couple questions in my mind. One is I'd like to build a logical argument that God exists.
Hmm.
And then I'd like to talk about something else that's interesting to me is that did we invent God or did God make us?
Oh, I know the answer to that. It's okay.
Oh,
I've,
good.
I've,
So we don't
I've,
even
I
have to.
figured that one out years ago. So,
Oh, nice. So we don't have to go through the logical argument.
but I'll humor you on that one. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Yeah, like in sixth grade, it's like you gotta okay. Just because you have the right answer, you gotta show your work. Show your work.
Okay.
Okay, so let's so I'm going to start with some premises. I've been kind of thinking about this, and I thought about this because we got a couple of comments on a short that I don't know if you read those or not, but it had been something like, okay, fair enough, God made us, but then who made God, right? That's
Hmm.
always seems to be the argument. And I
Who made
think
the first
that's
thing?
and I think that's the wrong question to be asking. And so here's kind of a thought, right? So I'm going to start with a premise that these are my assumptions coming in, that we are here, that we do exist. And I would think that's probably reasonable. Most people would say, okay, yes, right? I mean,
Okay. I understand you're trying to establish that. What is your worry about needing to? Why do you think you need to establish that?
I don't know why. I just want to start with that we actually are here and we do exist.
But you don't care what format. Like if we're in someone's mind, we're in a computer system somewhere. We're actually physically. None of that matters, right? Just we exist somehow. Is that?
Yeah, because I don't know that the other thing really matters.
I mean,
Because
at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if we're in a video simulation. You could still someone still had to create the video simulation, right? So I mean, that's
yeah, and I would tend to think we're probably in some kind of a simulation, actually.
okay. So
Um,
we
but that's a
exist. All
different.
right.
So we exist. So we start. So we do exist, right? And which means that we had to have gotten here somehow, right? So here I think is the air and thinking of the guy who commented.
Can I
So
ask you one
he
question before you go further? We exist. We all exist on our in and of ourselves. We're all individual beings, or does that matter?
I don't know that it matters, but it'd be nice. I haven't really thought that through. It could matter. I don't know. It could be impactful,
Okay.
but
So right at this point, it's not part of your calculation.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't even know how strong my calculation is. I just want to think this through.
Okay.
So
Go ahead.
then the question is, okay, who created God, right? And I'm like,
Sure.
okay, that's fair enough. So then let's say another God created God, right? But
Sure.
if you just keep going back with that, at some point, something had to go from nothing to something, right? At some point, it had to start. I mean, that's kind of my logic, and even that's not exactly right.
Something had to come into being somehow.
Something had to come into being, right? Somehow, some way,
Yeah.
right? So
Well, that's assuming you think God is a something and not a nothing, and we can get philosophical on that.
Well, definitely God's a something, right? I mean,
Okay. I mean
I, mean,
that that's
I would tend to think that, and this could be an error in thinking, that typically the person that created the thing is greater than the thing that they created, right?
well. So is gravity a thing or is it a thing or is it a nothing that has presence?
I have no idea.
The reason why I'm asking that is if I assume that God is a force, not a personality or personification of something, if I think it's like a force of nature, a force of the universe, a force of existence,
Yeah.
then we're starting to get into weird because as long as you have it as God as a our personification of God as a entity with characteristics and personality and the like, then I think you always are going to have to say who created that, who created that, who created that. But if you go to a
Well, so
force, you begin to push the edges of needing to define that in my mind.
well, hmm, does okay? Let me ask a question then. Does like matter like think? Does it have a conscience? I mean, is it aware of itself? Is that even important?
There are theorists or people who think that matter to exist has to have some sense of identity. It's kind of on the fringe, but there are people have stated that basically, as human beings, we have a lot more sense of identity. We're a much more complex thing, whereas a rock still has to have an identity as a rock. And is it defined by us through our minds, or is it defined as it really exists as a rock, right? So,
Yeah.
I would say my first gut reaction is no, matter doesn't have a conscious thought. However, I've heard arguments made that it does, or it has its own identity. However you want to figure that out.
And you'd have to, of course, you'd have to define what that means, right?
Yeah,
What a conscious thought is. I mean, and then you start going down a rabbit
but
hole.
let's assume. I assume you're going down the path of not. So let's assume that it doesn't have it, and just follow that
I
path.
think I am. I don't know. Actually, I'd be kind of curious about that. So, but my point, I guess my big point is at some point there had to be some sort of inception, right? So at some point, let's just say that a God created God, created God, created God. I mean, at some point, there's like, okay, it's got to start at some point. There has to be some starting point
So
in
one
my
day there
mind.
was nothing, and not day. At one point there was nothing. At another point there was something.
And I have a hard time believing this, but I mean, that is a possibility, right?
A scientist has a hard time believing that without going to the why or the how.
Yeah, right. So so kind of so the argument is that there had to be some force being. We're just labeled very loosely as God. There has to be some creator slash creative force. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. And I guess in my mind, I'm saying since we're here, therefore there was a creator. just follows by, logical argument. And that I want you to attack. Like, how valid do you think that is?
I think that the fallacy is that for things to exist today, something had to make it happen that way today, right? So if we go back to the idea, if you can say that God suddenly existed without something creating God, and then God
Yeah.
made everything else, I could just say one day everything existed, and I could just cut God out of that sentence and say one day there was nothing, the next day there was matter throughout the universe,
Yeah.
and it's I'm just as justified to make that argument as you are to say God suddenly existed one day,
Yeah, I think
right?
so. Yeah.
So
I
and then following that path, I can go down the exact same pathway of the formation of the universe and the galaxies and the Big Bang. I can go through all that formation in parallel, except I don't have God as the impetus for that. I have just whatever random chance, nature, whatever as the impetus of that.
Yeah, and I have a hard time. See, just as an engineer, I have a hard time believing that's true. It's more of a gut feeling. I don't have a logical argument for it. Just
But
because,
both of them require. I don't want to use immaculate inception, but they have a creation of something from nothing, right? That's why quite often people who argue that God has been there forever. There is nothing less. There is no nothing. There is always a God, right?
yeah,
When you start
that's
with
the
that,
general argument. Yeah.
when you start with that argument, then I can't use the fact that we're both using the same argument that nothing created something, and then that something, because once you take down that path, both paths are equally correct, right? God suddenly came into being and created the universe, or the universe suddenly came into being. Neither one, and then after that, they could be identical.
Well, and I've heard theologians talk about it like this: is that God has always existed. In fact, even to like ask the question of like what happened before God doesn't even make any sense, right? When
I
you're
think that's
talking
the only
about
way you can try to defend it is to take it out of take away the question. Because
yeah, and
the question, the natural thing for the mind is why, how, when. Now, these are
oh,
common questions we're going to ask. So,
yeah,
where did God come from? Who's God's dad? I have a
yeah,
dad. Who's God's dad? Those are
yeah.
common questions someone's going to ask. So the only way to really shut that down is to stop the question, and then you say he always was there, and there's nothing else.
Well, and the thing is there a possibility of that? Because in our mind, we're so locked into this time flow thing. Everything is before, after, during, right? There's before this, during this, after that. But is that really the right way to think about the universe? I mean, I guess then now I'm questioning the nature of time itself. Like, what is time? Right? What does that mean?
Well, I think it is the right way to question the universe through our lens.
Yeah, through our
Whether
lens.
with broader knowledge or broader senses or better tools, we're going to have a better understanding of the universe, and see time and other dimensions or of existence that we can't fathom right now,
We can't even
except
fathom.
except hints in mathematics or whatever, right? Um, if that were to happen, then we'd say no. So we're doing the best we can with the senses and our understanding of the world we have. So yeah, I can't say it's wrong to not to ask about something we don't know about.
Yeah, we just can't prove it either way. So I guess my kind of end all being all this is I don't think there's a way to actually prove God or to disprove. I don't know that there's a logical argument for that. I think the best one that I've heard is just probability of how that we would create something as complex as us. Just the mathematical probability of just random chance happening to form that is so limited. The chance that that happened is just basically off the table, right? But
So
that doesn't mean God exists, though, right?
so I get that feeling as well that the chance of us being in existence with how complex the universe seems unlikely without some kind of guidance.
Yeah,
However, that's bias. We're the ones who survived. How do we know if there aren't 16 trillion other options that failed?
we
I mean,
don't
if it
know.
is probability, what if we are just the one that got it,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
no, that's true.
The person
But
who
see,
wins the lottery isn't going, my gosh, it was a God's plan to give me. It's the lottery. Millions of other people did not win the lottery.
yeah,
Those were different paths that the lottery could have gone down. It didn't go down that path. It went down the path where this person won the lottery. So we are in the winning thing, and I can defend it through probability as much as I can, or whatever, probability as much as I could say someone directed it. So we're biased because we're here and we're like, oh my gosh, we are the lucky ones. There must be a reason why we're lucky, and we're trying to assign value to that. But
Yeah.
if I go strictly, mathematical scientific viewpoint here, no, we just happen to be the lucky one.
Well, and that's one reason I wanted to start with the fact that we are here, right? I mean, because if
Mm-hmm.
that's not true, then who knows? Like everything's off the table. So I think we can agree we are here in some form. But I don't know I don't know that mean. So I guess okay. Here's what I'm struggling with, Chris. Here's my real question, right? I just use this as an example. So there are limitations to logic. Like logic can't just by pure logic. I don't think we could say definitively there is a God or not a God. I don't think we can. I don't think that's possible.
Okay. I'm generally in agreement with that. What are you trying to say by bringing that up?
I don't know. I don't have an end game. I really don't have like an end
Okay.
game here at all. Other than
I think there
I
are some
just
things that we cannot prove with our understanding of the world today
yeah
because of the information we have today, because of the styles of thinking we've developed, because of the history of mankind and what we've learned over the however many thousands of years we've been around.
yeah
There are things that are not within our ability to articulate because we don't understand what we'd be articulating, right? I think that is so, and it's to me it's not a diss on logic that logic can't prove something that's not provable. Logic is very good at taking information and deriving things out of that, but you do that with the existence of God. At some point, you've got to take the existence of God on belief or faith that there is something happened that I cannot explain, but I'm okay with that.
yeah. It always comes back to that. But and I guess my point is that as much as I love logic, logic is not the ultimate tool. I mean, it has limitations. It can only do so much. You can do a
If
lot.
you only had one tool, if I think it's one of your best options, but to your point, it's not the only tool out there, and
No, no,
it
we
has
have
its
multiple
limitations.
tools. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it has its limitations. Yes.
yeah. It has its limitations actually. So I think with any
Well,
tool that we're using,
I
it's
think
good to know the limitations.
even back to the bad logic argument we had before, right? The logic wasn't bad. The input was bad, and therefore you couldn't come up with a viable decision using logic. If the inputs that you're using to make your logical conclusion are not good, then the outcome is going to be bad, right? And so I think the same thing applies here. Is we're in a situation where we don't have the right inputs to be able to prove or technically disprove the existence of God, and
Well,
therefore we have to have an option where either one can exist. Either there is a God or there isn't a God, and then you've got to make your own decision as to what you prioritize which one you believe more. You say this, I believe this one because of whatever my parents believed it, whatever you want, right?
I want to go against the word bad because I don't think it's bad. I just think
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, but so
it
I
doesn't
think
get the
when we're
right
talking about
answer.
bad logic, we're saying there isn't bad logic. There's bad information, bad inputs, and that's what, and bad meaning incorrect or inaccurate
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or
I don't like the word
insufficient,
bad. Yeah,
right? Insufficient input,
insufficient.
like
Yeah,
right. And I think that's where we end up with. So when you talk about logic failing to be able to prove the existence of God, it's because, well, we may never have the right inputs, but if you had the right inputs, maybe you
yeah.
could.
Could yeah, yeah, exactly. So I guess my point is I just want to make sure that there's nothing sacred about logic. It's just a very good tool, but it does have limitations. It doesn't have unlimited capabilities.
There's nothing sacred about it, but there is a lot of upside to it, value to it, that has withstood a lot of unreasoned, because it's based on reason. It insulates itself a lot from the emotional impact of things that happen, and so it's withstood very well. I think what
Yeah.
happened though was after the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, I guess, after the Enlightenment came about, it suddenly became a replacement for God, And what you ended up with is a lot of people basically turning science into a religion over several hundred
Yeah.
years. So
Yeah.
there's two parts of science. There's the real scientific method and the belief in science and following of the principles and all that sort of thing, and discovery and invention. And then there's kind of the dogma around science
Yeah.
that basically has turned it into, oh, we're better, it's better than everything else. And I think
Yeah.
that's where it's running into problems.
Yeah, and that happens all the time. I mean, I was watching some guy, I can't remember who he was on TV, but he was talking about like certain areas of like physics. We haven't made any progress in like, I don't know, 50, 60 years because
Yeah,
nobody's funding that
they're stuck
research.
on string theory, and apparently that's an old that's a view that was Einstein, I believe, right? String theory came out of Einstein's
I am
work.
not sure actually who created it, but it's interesting that it's not funded anymore. And in fact, now it's so dogmatic, the fact that people say that, look, if you go down and you want to pursue that line of logic or that kind of work, it's like you're killing your career, right? Because we're
Was
not going
this
to
Eric
fund.
Weinstein you were listening to?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Because
exactly.
he's had a lot of interesting commentary about the problem with the science
Yeah.
industry, the science,
Yeah, it's just interesting to think about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the fact that you can't write papers and do research without getting a certain number of people to back you. If you
Yeah,
don't get
right.
people, and the backing is like other people who are following whatever dogma they're
Yeah.
in, so it's really
Yeah.
tough to get new
Yeah.
viewpoints out with
Yeah.
any yeah. It's
Sounds
an
kind of like
interesting thing. Yeah.
religion to me, actually, you
Oh, it
know.
sounds like the institutions of religion, right? When
Mhm.
the church gets so
Mhm.
big that suddenly it's not doing what it's supposed to do and it's getting corrupt, and that's what it feels like. But government's that way.
Yeah.
Big businesses become that way. I mean, it seems like everything over time just slowly corrupts.
Because it's just people, because ultimately people run it, and that's just kind of people are inherently selfish, and they're like, well, we don't like that, so we're not going to fund that. So, in fact,
And do you think it's intentionally becoming that way, or it's like that's the lazy way out, and eventually everything just kind of moves towards what is everything moves towards entropy, right? Everything moves towards disorder. Because I'm thinking like when a company first forms, the founder of the company has a vision, and
yeah,
usually that first generation, that company stays on vision.
yeah,
And maybe even a couple of generations if it stays within a family. But at some point, when it gets big enough, the shareholders own it, and you hire people who weren't part of the original vision to run it. The vision falls apart, and then bit
yeah,
by bit, the company becomes something else.
yeah, yeah. They've lost their they've lost their purpose, right? They've
And
lost something.
it doesn't mean there's no value in them, but it means
No.
that that thing that drove them in the first place is no longer there.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. Yeah, that's fascinating. So, anyways, I don't know what I wanted to get at. I just like thinking through things. I guess what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the edges of things, like like what can this tool do? What can it not do? Trying to understand the tool, you know?
Generally speaking, I can still apply logic to almost everything. Where it begins to fall apart is where factual evidence becomes harder to get.
Yeah,
And when I
that's
say
what I.
factual, I mean something that you and I can both see and measure and come away with that same value, the same
Yeah,
thing.
right. Yeah, but I guess that's why I guess made the comment at the very beginning. Could we use logic just by itself to prove the existence of God? And it sounds like probably no is the answer.
No, at some point I've got to take a leap in my logic to understand, to believe that something can exist without a reason to, without a cause or a how or why it came into being.
That you understand. Yeah, there could be a how or a why, you just don't know it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I could go down the rabbit hole over and over again, but at some point I'm going to run into this idea that there had to be something had to come into existence in the beginning, and what was
Yeah.
that, and how did it happen? And as soon as I ask that question, it's the logic can't follow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's interesting. Yeah, okay. So logic doesn't do everything. And so I kind of hate that, but I think that is true, right?
Well, now
Logic can take you so far.
does your theory that love is a requirement in all of this as well, love or service to others or however you want to define it,
I think so. Yeah.
does that provide an answer?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just I think there's this like okay. So I'm just gonna be like ridiculous, right? But so
Okay.
if you watch Star Trek and you look at Mr. Spock,
Is
and
that what you were doing today when I mentioned Star Trek? You had your hands up in the air in
yeah,
the
I was like,
meeting.
yeah. Hey, I was trying to do some weird thing, but I can't do it. You know? Mr.
Oh,
Spock.
the live long and prosper. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, so it's so interesting because if you go back and you look at the Vulcans, apparently Mr. Spock was saying that the Vulcans used to be amazingly, horribly emotional, actually. I mean, to the part where they're
Barbaric.
almost barbaric, where they're going to basically kill themselves, right? So they had to adopt logic as a survival mechanism, and then they probably have pushed it so far. So it's not that Vulcans are not emotional; they've just done such a good job at suppressing it that it doesn't affect them as
Oh,
much as it used
you
to.
remember the episode where he had to go back to Vulcan to mate?
Yeah, right.
Like it was every 7 years or however many years.
Damar, or whatever
Yeah,
like that. Whatever that thing.
they had to go back and remember he had to fight Kirk and his emotions were coming through and it's like yeah
Yeah,
I mean they have a like a purge, like was that movie The Purge where you get one day
yeah,
a year to go do whatever you want. It's like they have an emotional purge every few years. It's basically
yeah.
what it is.
So even as logical as Mr. Spock is, he's still not 100% logical, actually.
But so there's an assumption there, even in Gene Roddenberry's writings, that he made this race, but he couldn't make them totally logical, so he had to give them this outlet to have emotions come through,
Yeah,
right? And or even the argument when Spock talks to his father, why did you marry my mother? She's a human, right? You know,
this is
and I think
logical. Yeah,
yeah, and I think he actually does get her to say he loves her, but I mean that's kind of that was
yeah.
like a win for him. But the idea though that why would anything have to have an emotional side? See, why couldn't I just create, theoretically, why can't a race exist that biologically does what it needs to live and truly is strictly logical?
Well, I'm sure there's things like that. Probably ants and honeybees and things probably don't have as much
They react
emotion.
to pheromones, right? And when they feel
Yeah,
threatened, boom, they go into attack mode, and
yeah, but is that emotion or is that just how they're
that's
programmed?
that's chemical programming, right? So I'm
Yeah, right.
saying, and so I don't know. Do we have to look at them as a single body as opposed to individual creatures, like a hive? Because the thing I do wonder is it possible for a biological being to exist without chemical reactions that cause the equivalent of emotions?
Well,
And I think they have to exist. You would have to exist for millions of years without any kind of threat to evolve that out of your body, right? Because we're evolved for survival, right? Fight or flight mechanism, right? The hormones going through your body when you realize you're in danger. That's there for a reason.
yeah, that's there for a reason. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't think you can exist on a biologically without an emotional response that's biochemical, unless you had been around, your species had been around for so many millions or billions of years with no threat that you could actually evolve that out of the body.
Well, and that's assuming we've evolved, right? I mean, could have just be created and poof, just here we are, right? This is
Well,
just how
but
we're made.
so that's an interesting thing because I think I told you I had a biology teacher
Mhm.
who believed in God and was also a biology teacher, right?
Yeah,
He believed in evolution too. And the way he squared it was the Bible was a story, evolution is what happened, and that God steered evolution.
possible. I mean,
Right?
possible. Yeah,
His viewpoint was he didn't hold to the Garden of Eden story as actual fact. He said this is the story, the evolution is what happened, and God made evolution happen. So it's
yeah,
a little more of a deist viewpoint, right? That
yeah. I mean, it's possible. I have no idea if it's true or not. I just wonder if we'll ever know the truth. I
why
wonder
do
if
we
we're
need to know
smart.
the truth? Why do you need to know if it's factually true or not?
Because there's just some built-in curiosity in engineers. It's like we just want to know how this thing works. We want to
Want
take it
to know
apart,
and need to
right?
know are two different things, right? I think wanting
Well,
to
yeah,
know is a continual drive. You'll always look for an answer if you want to know.
yeah, yeah.
I often wonder if, and this is more in like the Jordan Peterson viewpoint, the existence of God doesn't matter. The idea of God is what matters. And
What?
therefore, society needs to have a way to explain a variety of things that happen that are beyond the scope of an average person understanding. In the old days, that would have been the science stuff that we've discovered since then. You know, why does the sun come up? Why does the sun go down? Things that we know now that needed to be explained somehow in the past. But then there are things like, when a child dies, way too early, and all the kinds of things where people need a reason to understand and
You need a
accept
reason.
to get through it. I think that in many ways, the existence of God is less important than the idea of God.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, certainly the idea is good, but yeah, that's interesting. Hey,
Right.
can I take a tangent break just for a second?
Okay.
So I'm drinking this element stuff right here
Yep.
called something like strawberry salt or something like that. I
Hmm.
just started drinking it like about 20 minutes ago since we started the more than that. We started about 3:05, right? Um,
Yep.
I'm getting like a buzz off this thing. Do you ever get that? Is it possible to get like a head change from salt and magnesium and
If you were
potassium?
really low on salt, you could. I would assume.
Woo, I'm like kind of feeling it, you know?
I mean, if you were pretty dehydrated and your salt content was low, I think if you were to take in a large amount of salt, it would. I don't know if it's a rehydrate, but it would go through your body and you'd probably feel it. Yeah.
I'm definitely feeling it. Maybe that was dehydrated. Maybe there is something to that gallon a day of water.
I was thinking about that earlier. Drinking a gallon a day, I'm like, I've gone through 3 of these. This is my third one of these. This is a 32 ounces, so I got one more to go, and I got a gallon. I was like, a gallon of water is not that much water. I don't know.
You know, I wanted to really push back against that. I love it and hate it at the same time. Is that when you
Hmm.
just generically broadcast out that everybody should be drinking a gallon of water every day, regardless of what you're doing, your body weight, your size, how much you're sweating.
My wife is about half my size, a little more, like say 60% my size. She cannot drink as much water as I drink.
Yeah, it just seems like kind of a bad idea in general. Just taking this thing that may be kind of right. And then I have questions. I guess we're off the God thing now. We're going on to water or whatever, but
We can go.
uh,
We can go back to God later.
okay, fine.
He'll always
Um,
be there.
But then my question is, do you really need a gallon of water? And then I started asking the question, thinking about all this. Like everybody doesn't even question it. Yeah, I got to drink a gallon of water. A gallon of water a day is good, right? But it was a question like, well, how much do you actually need? And what happens if you don't have enough water? And is there a way to measure it? I mean, these are the things that are going through my mind or whatever.
And did
As
you
well,
follow up on any of that?
no, I didn't actually.
So I tell you
But I
what
thought,
I would have done, and I've done this week on other topics, is I would have gone probably to chat or one of the ones that I can interact with and say, you know, what is the minimum amount of water a person needs every day?
yeah.
What is a healthy amount? Where is this idea of a gallon a day? It used to be two quarts a day. Remember, it was half a gallon a day was what it used to be years ago. You
Yeah,
should
the
drink half
default
a
is
gallon.
8 cups, right? That's been
Yeah.
the standard forever.
So, which is half a gallon. So I'm like,
Oh,
so I would start asking questions like, where does this come from? What's the belief behind
yeah,
this? Blah blah blah. And then in these philosophies, does a Coke count as water? Does a coffee count as water? Right?
yeah,
I would start going in because liquid is a different thing than just water. So I don't
yeah.
know. I don't. Yeah, a gallon a day was just pushing the limits. Because I know that if you drink too much water, you can affect your kidneys because the kidneys have to filter out all the liquid that comes in your body. And if you start
Yeah.
overworking the kidneys, they can actually shut down. So you can drink too much water. It's possible.
Yeah, it is possible you can die from too much water. I mean, it's extraordinarily rare, but I mean, technically it's possible. You know?
So again, yeah. To your point, where does this come from? Like, where does a lot of this health guidance that we all hear about today really come from?
Yeah, and it's questioned. And here's the thing: that the vast majority of people that are not like whatever we are, engineers slash thinkers or whatever like that, they would never even question it. They're like, "Oh, I should just drink a gallon of water." And my first thought is like, "Do I really need that? Why?" I mean, can I trust my body when I'm thirsty? And my body tells me when to drink water. I mean, shouldn't that be the principal source, right? My
Well, so
body.
they stripped it all down to this idea, right? Because it's like obviously the size of the person, their body weight, how active they are, where they live, all that kind of stuff is going to have an impact on
Yeah,
how much water they should take. So, but instead they just strip it down to drink a gallon a day.
yeah, right,
So it's
right.
like it's like when you simplify something, you lose all the nuance.
You lose all the nuance, and it still might be the right move. It might because they might say, well, anything from half a gallon is fine to a gallon, and hotter you should have a little more.
So
Just everybody drink a gallon.
it's
Right?
directionally right,
Yeah, right.
but it's not necessarily accurate. And this is the problem we've got with so many things is to simplify something so I can get a point across to you, I strip out a lot of the nuance and I
Yeah,
tell you what it is. Now, if you're resistant to it because for whatever reason you're wired that way, you don't believe it, whatever, you will now harp on the things that I stripped out. Saying,
yeah,
but what about this and what about that? And what about this edge case and that edge case over there? And I'm like, yeah, that's all there, but I was trying to get a point across to you. I was trying to simplify it down to the one thing. right? I was taking 15 different variables and giving you one thing that you could control.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
Yeah.
is not bad. I mean, there
No.
is a lot to be said for that. Like early on in my jujitsu days, the guy literally, I drove him crazy. He's like, just stop asking questions. Just stop thinking so much. Just copy. Left foot here, right hand here. You'll understand later, but just trust me. Just do this right now. You don't need to think, right? This has 100 years of history, this technique. Battle tested. It's guaranteed to work. Just do it. You know?
One thing that always comes to my mind is people who can play music by ear
Yeah.
versus people who can play sheet music. It's a totally different skill set.
Yeah.
It comes out the same in that they're playing music, but I have a much harder time listening to something by ear and playing it than I do just taking a piece of music and playing it, because
Okay,
I
yeah.
learned how to read music, right?
Yeah.
I think you can learn by doing, or you can learn by knowing and
Yeah.
then adding the doing later. And
Yeah.
in many ways, we can go to larger masses of people by teaching them something and then letting them do some action to follow up. It's less actual individual work. But some, people can also just learn one-on-one doing it themselves.
Yeah.
They'll learn trial and error and failure and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And in many ways, they may exceed the person who learns it through the rote method because they actually have wired it into their body in a different way. It's not,
Yeah.
and so this is an argument against the intellectual part of things. Maybe when you wire it intellectually, we can get more people to understand it. Oops, I don't know what I just did. But when we wire it more towards the emotion feeling side, then we can build it into our existence in a different way.
Yeah,
So
it goes in a lot deeper. Yeah, right.
So someone who learned art at art school versus someone who learned art by going out and doing it
Yeah, right.
are going to have different qualities in what they produce.
Different qualities, yes.
Right.
Yeah, they're gonna have different capabilities. Yeah, it's so interesting. I think you ultimately need both, but that's what jujitsu does. Is literally your body's learning, and it's like he didn't tell me. He didn't. I'm not going this far. It's like I'm not telling you to stop thinking, but for you individual, you Scott, you think way too much, right? And the funny thing is, Chris, as soon as I stopped thinking so much, as soon as I started just copying, my jujitsu man shot through the freaking roof because I stopped trying to think. Because he's like, listen, dude, I mean, no offense to you, you're like a smart guy. But he goes, we've been doing this for 100 years, battle testing this. We know precisely exactly how this works. You don't need to think it through. Just copy. Just execute this. And when I started doing that, it's like, holy crap. I'm like, whoa. And it's like a different part of me started learning, which is very interesting.
Well, I often wonder if someone who sits down and just studies and doesn't do the thing, they're going to be really bad at doing it until they actually start doing it. But I do wonder if at some point the knowledge level they've picked up will let them to grow more exponentially than someone who didn't. So
very possible. Yeah.
At some point, when you've put in enough time or hours or whatever, then that their value comes through. But the value doesn't come through until you put in a certain number of hours.
Yeah. Right. You just basically got to put the reps in. Seems
so
like
if you go straight into practicing jiu-jitsu, and I go here and I study how the human body works, you'll get proficient at jiu-jitsu in a year. It'll take me 5 years to learn this, but when I start doing jiu-jitsu, I'll probably learn it fast.
You'll probably learn it faster. Yeah, maybe. I'm not 100% sure. It depends on who your teacher is, I think, right?
But so this is one of the things that came up today in the Toastmasters was how you respond when you feel versus no, I guess, is the way it was.
Yeah.
Well, and what came to my mind is gut feelings. When you get a gut feeling, right? So someone says, "How do you feel about this?" or "How do you feel about that?" And I'm like, I trust my gut feeling quite a bit, because if it's in an area that I know a lot about. Right. If it's an area I don't know a lot about, then I'm much more reluctant to believe my gut feeling. I still have a gut feeling, right? What do I know about human nature? What do I know about people? What do I know about this topic? What do I know about politics? What do I know about how cars work? Whatever it is, right? All of that plays into my gut feeling. And the thing is, when you're well educated in an area, your gut feeling is probably pretty correct.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, right.
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 So there's nothing wrong with trusting your gut feeling. I'm assuming, like, if we were out in a scenario where we're out hunting in the woods to survive for food, I would trust the gut feeling of the guy who knew who'd been out there
Of
before
course.
versus the person who hadn't been. Right. I mean, but it occurred to me that kind of gut feeling. So I'll tell you an example of something happened this week. I don't know why this question came up. It was probably from I was listening to the news, but it occurred to me, how many times has the person who won the presidency lost the popular vote?
Oh, I don't know, actually.
Right? And then I was thinking, I wonder how many of those were Republicans? What percentage? And what this started was, I started with this idea that I think popular vote tends to shy towards the left. So I think popular vote tends to be more Democratic. So my expectation was I would go and look how many actual elections were there where the one who won the president did not in fact win the popular vote.
Yeah.
And it turns out 5 times in American history. And the first time was before there were Republicans. They were the Democratic Republicans, right?
Mhm.
And before they split up and became the Democrats and the Republican Party. And that was one where Andrew Jackson did not win the popular vote. But after that, it's happened 4 times. All 4 times have been Republicans who've won the presidency, but did not win the. So I was like, my gut feeling was telling me that the popular vote leans left, and so I said, I bet you if I look at that, that's what I'll find. And it turns out, in all instances that I could find where there was a Republican Party, the Republican Party was the one who won the presidency but lost the popular vote.
Well,
So
interesting. Yeah, that's so interesting. So I was watching Charlie Kirk. He was explaining this, right? And he had a really good estimate because, as a general rule, the founders and even the Greeks, they didn't like the idea of democracy. They basically thought democracy equals mob rule was their thing. They think, what a bad idea, because it's just an emotional sort of thing, which is interesting too. I was studying the other night, like, mob behavior, that is zero logic, 100% emotion in a mob sort of thing, actually. And so the thing they didn't like about that was the fact you stop thinking, right? Then everything's just emotional. And so Charlie Kirk made an argument for the first time that was so interesting. He said, like, so typically we just went by, and so typically Democrats want to get rid of the what's it called? Crap, losing my mind, Chris.
Electoral college.
Yeah, exactly. And the Democrats think, well, we want the popular vote to win, right? Because that's the will of the people. But the way he broke it down, the genius of the founding fathers was they broke down the difference between popular votes versus states' rights. So he says, if we win just by popular vote, the coastlines are going to decide everything for all the interior states, actually. Yep. So let's say you're in Kentucky, right? You have basically zero say-so, where, since the state has a little bit more right? Each of those people in the state, they have a little more, in some cases, significantly more voting right than somebody in California, right? Because we get 2 senators every state, regardless of your population. So I just thought that was so interesting that as actually could be closer to the actual will of the people, because it's closer to the group of people, that the law is closer to the people that it's going to be changing or controlling. And I never thought of it like that before. I thought that was so interesting.
Closer to the people? What do you mean by that?
So let's say, for instance, everyone's by popular vote, right? That means the coastlines are going to decide for people who live in Kentucky, like what they do, right? A lot about what they do, as opposed to letting the state, the people that live in Kentucky, control what they do. And
you're arguing something else there. You're talking federal versus state rights.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right. So when you're talking about the popular vote winning, let's say we did choose the presidency off the popular vote, and then you would say that is a vote that represents Americans as one bucket. Doesn't matter where you live, it's a bucket. Bucket of Americans, and whoever has the most votes in that bucket wins. That would be that, right? So I think, the whole state rights, that was where they broke down the states and they gave them all voting rights in the Senate, right? And we have at least 2 senators and all that sort of, and you made the Senate the more powerful of the 2 legislative bodies. all of that, I mean, really genius design when you think about that. So
Genius
no
design.
matter how populous, you could have 99% of the country living in one state.
Yes, right.
The other 49 states will only have 1% of the population amongst them. They still have equal rights in the Senate. Now, in the House of Representatives, they would be outnumbered heavily, which like California has, more than anyone else.
Yeah.
And California has a lot of influence in there, but it doesn't have enough influence to decide the whole thing, right?
Right.
But you say, but there are things we want states to be able to control at a local level, because local politics is always better for the local people. Local politics represents the local needs, right?
Yes,
so you always want your city politics, your state politics, your county politics, all of that. You want to keep as much there as possible. And this then goes into the whole argument that, Hamilton had and all these other people had. How much control should the federal government have over the states?
Yeah.
Right? And the whole reason for the Civil War was breaking up the Union, and Lincoln didn't want the Union to be broken up because he thought it would make us weak. But it was all an argument between state power versus federal power, and the federal government was weak for a long time.
Yeah,
for a long time, the federal government was weak.
Yeah. So I just like when I guess my point is I probably presented that really badly. I need to get better at presenting this sort of stuff. But when I heard that, I'm like, it is so interesting how a well-crafted, well-spoken argument can like change people's minds on things. Like I was watching, who was he? Ginsburg. No, not Ginsburg. I can't remember who he was. Scalia. I can't remember. One of the Supreme Court justices, right? He was basically talking about Roe versus Wade. And he goes, I thought this was a bad idea from the very, very beginning, actually. And one thing that he did very carefully, whether it's true or not, but he said it, he goes, my personal opinion is irrelevant to this. It does not matter. My job is to interpret the Constitution to the best of my ability. That's my job, right?
I think that's politicians' jobs too, but that's not how it is. But yes,
I thought that was very interesting. And then he said basically he thought that a Roe versus Wade was completely unconstitutional, actually. Because he's like, I get the woman's right to choose. But he said in the Constitution, the unborn baby is considered a person. And you cannot take away the rights of a person without due process. And he goes, therefore...
Sure you can. You just throw them out of the country.
Chris, come on.
I mean, that's exactly what's happening right now. It's exactly what happened in World War II when American citizens were put in concentration camps. So America does this all the time. The question is, when do we wake up to it and then make a decision, a conscious decision?
According to the Constitution, let's argue this in a second, actually. But according to the Constitution, you can't be denied those rights. That's according to the Constitution.
Correct. Yeah.
So therefore, that's it. I just thought it was so interesting. He crafted it. Therefore, I can't support from a federal level, like an abortion right. That's why we got to push it to the states to let each state.
And then if a state, if for any reason a state's law came up in front of the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court might say your state law is wrong too because it goes against the Constitution of the United States. They could apply the same logic at that point, but the first law is we can't at the federal level allow this to be decided. And so they're saying, the states, you go decide. And then if the states were to somehow bring it to a federal judge, they would either say it has no jurisdiction, or they would say, you're right, this is unconstitutional under the same grounds.
Yeah,
right.
Which I thought that argument was just so interesting, just a cool argument.
But this is the way I expect the Supreme Court. So you remember the old show, The West Wing?
Yeah, I think I watched a few of it, yeah.
There was an episode where they had to replace 2 of the Supreme Court justices. And they pick one conservative and one liberal, and they put them on there. But the whole episode, they were getting, all these people were yelling politics about left versus right and all that kind of stuff. And then when the actors who were playing the Supreme Court justices got together, they were arguing law. They weren't arguing left and right. They were arguing law, right? Yeah. And so that to me is what we expect, right? So this is why I have a problem with some of the people on the Supreme Court who don't appear to understand that they need to appear independent. They need to uphold certain values amongst themselves that make me not question whether or not they're actually of this caliber of person.
Yeah.
And so I do have some problems with some of the people on the Supreme Court. But at the end of the day, I mean, they could say that's not the federal government's job to do that. State government, that's within your ballywhack. And the state government can then say, you know what, we don't want to handle this at the state level. You can handle it at the county level.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it can go all the way down, technically.
I just thought it was so interesting just the argument has logic. And my whole point with this is that I just it's so compelling when you have a well thought through, well presented, non-emotional
But
argument.
but I guess so. What would be the argument that it is a federal issue? So if you're harping on the baby aspect of it, then it's a being that deserves due process by the Constitution, right?
Well, to do that deserves, through the Constitution says you have to do due process, right? You
Right.
can't
So
take
that
away their rights without due
so then
process.
if you harp on the other side, which is that if you harp on the other side, which is that the woman's right to control her body and what happens to it is paramount, that actually becomes a it's not a human right, it's a US whatever resident's right to do that. Then the question is, are you going to say that the state has to make that decision? Because that seems to be more about, that means in some states you're treated differently than in others on something about your rights to your body.
Yeah, of
Do we
course.
allow
Yeah.
that? Do we allow that anywhere else in any other rights to our body? I guess we do. Some states allow suicide. Some states don't.
I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, it's kind of a
No, but some states have legal assisted suicide and some states
Oh
don't.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess we do. We do have a precedent of an individual's right varying from state to state.
Yeah, right.
So that's an
Right.
argument to allow the states to decide. Because I was thinking, when it came up with gay marriage, right? Some
Yeah.
states were having gay marriage before other states were, and there was a big argument that they should leave it at the state level. But the thing is, almost all states had reciprocal agreements. Because I don't think there was a federal law about marriage; it was all at the state level, But all the states had reciprocal laws where they recognized marriages in other states. So if someone said, "I got married in Arkansas," and California goes, "Okay, it's a legal marriage. We
Yeah.
accept that." But the problem is when you started having states that had gay marriages and other states that didn't like that, then what happens to the reciprocal law? Is it really reciprocal anymore? Is it only sometimes reciprocal? And so not having a federal rule about that really makes things break apart, right?
Oh no, I know, I know. It's just interesting. And I don't want to argue into individual cases. My main point was it's just interesting how he just thought through that, right? And so I
Well,
guess
you respected the logic.
yeah, that's what I like. I liked the logic of it. Yeah, I
I
thought that was
respect a good argument. I really expect a good argument that I disagree with, because
yeah,
then
yeah.
it makes me understand the other side.
Yeah, so then the question is, through the Constitution, an unborn baby is considered a person. But so is that true, right? So let's take, and so what I like to do in this case is something I chastised you the other day for doing, but I'm going to do it right now because as long as I do, it's different. Right? It's like what I like to do is I like to take things to the extreme just to see, like, if this has any legs at all or whatever like
Okay.
that. So let's say, how can I do this without not being totally crass? I'm just going to be crass, right? So let's
Okay.
say you masturbate and there's semen that's not used to impregnate a woman, right? So you could argue that face, well, that is completely wrong because that could have made a baby.
Potential life.
You
Potential life.
potentially could have made that baby. And I'm like, okay, dude, that's
Okay.
like,
Monty Python's going through my head right now. That song, every sperm is sacred. It's going through my head right now.
And so in that particular case, I think the average person, right, would say, well, nah, we're okay with that. That's you're not killing, you're not causing any harm to anybody, right? And then I want to go the other way and say that a woman who has a baby and he happens to be 30 years old and he pisses his mom off and she just takes a gun and shoots him in the head. So is that okay? And it's like most people say, well, clearly that's not okay, right? That's so where does it become okay? Where's the line exactly? And I think it's kind of interesting. For me, it's just a tool that I can use just to sort of go to extremes and just see, like, where does this thing start falling apart?
So let's start with a 30-year-old that mom gets angry at and wants to wipe out, right?
Yeah.
Why can't you? What's wrong with that?
Because it's called murder.
Sure.
Even if it's your own son. And
Is
there's
it
laws
because it's called murder, or is there because there's something wrong with it? Just because it's called murder, I mean, what is the thing that is morally upsetting about the idea of someone killing an adult child?
Well, from a just a pure logic point of view, she took his due process away from him, right? So we have certain expected things that we're allowed or not allowed to do in the United States, right? So that's that. So she took away a right from him without due process.
When did those rights accrue to him?
Well, according to the Constitution, an unborn baby is considered a person.
You're saying a person gets due process, but due process varies depending on the conditions, right? A child who's under a parent's jurisdiction, the parent often is the one who's held accountable for them. So there are certain things that change over time. So at what point does the adult child become have the rights where the person should not be allowed to wipe them out? I think if you go backwards, I think you can go back to like, okay, well, definitely once they're their own adult, they are their own person. Once they turn 18, they are a separate legal entity outside of parent jurisdiction, whatever, that they're on their own at that point, right?
Well, I think most people would argue that past 18 clearly not.
So I think you can just say you're a separate citizen, human, whatever, legal entity in the United States. That's it. So we're carving that out. So you definitely shouldn't be killing anyone over the age of 18. Now let's start going. Okay, now we got under the age of 18. So now what happens? Well, why shouldn't
you can argue? Well, how about 17? Then is 17 okay?
Well, I think 18 down to birth is a pretty logical argument that you can make, that once you are born, you are entitled to certain rights, to the existence. Society needs to protect you. Society has a recommendation to protect you and to try to make. I think you can make all kinds of arguments that basically say that society has a duty to protect you, the way we've structured society.
Yeah.
And and the parent, the assumption is the parent is the one who's going to represent that. But if the parent for some reason doesn't represent that, society steps in and protects the child.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So
right.
we're down to birth now. So now we're starting at, okay, what happens before birth?
Well, that becomes more difficult because here's the argument, right? The argument is, well, the child can't survive without the mother, right?
Neither can a 6-month-old, though.
It's a little different, right? I'm like, okay, there's a little bit of truth there, but I'm like, but using that logic, then if the child's 6 months old, right, you could kill
old people who are people on a ventilator. I mean, there's a whole bunch of arguments on that. So there is a viability argument. I think the viability argument is not a standalone argument.
No. It applies to some extent, but at some point you're like, no, you can't do that, right?
There's also then like the viability of a baby taken out of the womb, somewhere 20 to 24 weeks or something. They can often survive, with medical intervention, right? But the idea is they're actually formed well enough that they could survive.
But if you take a baby out that's 6 months old and you leave him alone, he can't survive by himself.
Yeah, no. But what I'm getting at is with medical intervention, even down to the age of like 20 weeks. I'm talking about still in the womb. 20 to 24 weeks. You can have children born premature still survive with medical intervention.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So survivability versus survivability is one thing. Yeah, as long as we accept the fact that interventions involved, right? So I think most people would say, a 6-month-old cannot take care of themselves, but there's an assumption there that society or the adult or whatever will be involved in taking care of them. So yes. I think if you take the assumption that there's going to be a safety net to take care of the 6-month-old, how far down do we take that safety net? Do we take it to before birth? Do we take it to premature babies? Do we take it to what stage? First trimester, second trimester, third trimester? Right?
I don't know.
The cleanest definition you have is conception.
Yeah.
But the problem we have with that is it's going against an idea that people that a group of people have, a large group of Americans have, that the right of the mother to control her own body has a huge weight. So if you weigh that against this idea, can we come up with other things, other phases along the way where we say it's okay to have that abortion until a certain age?
Well, and I think it depends on who you talk to, but certainly, I don't want to say the vast because I don't know the thing, but certainly the general thought is is if you're going to do that, the sooner the better, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, a clump of cells versus something that's actually forming into a identifiable human. I mean, technically,
Yeah.
a clump of cells is still a human. It's just not, what do they call the clump of cells? The gastoblast or whatever. I forgot what the term was.
A what? Is
The,
that faster?
something blast. I forgot what
A
it is the term.
zogide?
What was that?
A zogide or zogide or whatever, the single
A
cell.
zygote is
Zygote,
wait,
yeah.
zygote.
That's a single one cell that's been fertilized, right?
Is it fertilized? Yeah, okay. I
Yeah,
remember there's zygote,
zygote.
there's zygote, there's embryo. Anyway, there's all the different terms. Yeah, so I think the idea is if you say you have to have the rights to abortions, then you need to come up with a defining line as to when it's no longer okay. And the
Yeah.
problem with that is there's no agreement on that, right? So it could
No, there's
vary,
no agreement. Yeah,
right?
no agreement. Yeah, but as a general rule, though, it becomes less and less tolerable the longer you wait.
Yeah. Well, then
I mean,
then
there's
so
some
then
people at like 8 months will say, "Fine, kill it," right? And other
yeah.
people, most people will be like, "No, that's too far. That's
Yep.
you're crossing the line at that point." So yeah, yeah. So anyways, I don't know. I just thought it was. I don't want to argue about abortion or not abortion. Yeah, I don't know what I am. As a general, I'm probably more against it. I'm like, let's just make sure we have a. Let's just like make sure we talk through every other option
Okay,
first.
so Scott, in this logic scenario, where does love fit in?
Well, that's an interesting one because I know I've talked to women who have had abortions when they were younger, and they are still bugged by it, deeply, deeply bugged by it, because they still love their baby and they feel there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot going on actually. And sometimes the older they get, they the more it weighs on them of what they have done.
So how would okay, so I think that is a group of people. I think also think given the numbers of abortions that happen in the U.S., that the bulk of people that are having them are having as a form of birth control, not as not for economic reasons, not for medical reasons. And so
Yeah.
then then the question you need to ask is if you have a culture where it's considered okay as a form of birth control, is that in fact what emotion is tied to it? And I'm not sure that the people you're talking to are an accurate representation. I don't know if
No,
there's
I've
a
only
million
talked to
abortions a
like two,
year.
I've only heard it two or
If
three
there's a
times.
million abortions a year, my sense is that 90% of those don't have the emotional tie to it that we're attributing to it here.
That I don't know. That's the thing is, Chris, is I don't think we can make any assumptions because we just don't know, right?
No, but the other thought I had was actually from women who are frustrated at not having their rights, living in states where their right has been taken away from them, the emotional experiences they're going through. Shouldn't love be part of that conversation too? I mean,
I think so.
if someone is seriously feels attacked because they lost their right to control their reproductive rights, isn't that something that needs to be considered in this conversation?
Hmm.
It's not a logical thing. It's just an extra fact.
Everything should be considered deeply. Yes. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Super important. And that's why, as a general rule, I think it's next to impossible to make one law that fits every single case. Because as a general rule, Chris, where I want to go, and not every time, but the vast bulk of times, I want to push the authority to where the information lives. As a general rule.
Yes. You put the decision making as close to the information as possible,
Yep.
as close to the action as possible.
Yep.
But
Yep.
that means
And
that means you've got to build a level of trust in the people making those decisions. And
yeah.
usually in an organized structure, it's hard to guarantee that the people are going to make the right kind of decisions. So you start to build more strict rules for them to follow, and that leaves very little wiggle room and interpretation. And so
Yeah.
you end up people feeling very restricted. Um, this specific thought came to my mind today. I was watching. I don't know why it came up. The video of the judge who let one of the illegal immigrants go. You heard about that?
Hmm.
So there was an illegal
The
immigrant
one
brought to
woman,
court.
yeah.
It was
She's
brought to
arrested.
court
They
by
arrested her.
I don't know which one it was. It was a female judge who let him go, and I'm like, okay, aside from whatever crime you committed, you no longer believe in the rule of law. And when that happens, you have nothing to do with the legal system anymore. I'm sorry. The rule of law is the basis of this country. Our wealth, the capitalist society, everything we have in this country, in my mind, comes from our rule of law.
Yeah, but I'm going to argue against that point. As much as I did, I heard another story, another idea, and her point was this: like, listen, I get doing that, but he was working in the system. He's showing up to court. He's doing the things. You don't come and arrest people that we're currently working with, because what that'll do is that'll send a message that nobody will try to work right anymore. Nobody will try to do it the legal way, actually. And I'm like,
Those can all be valid points.
yeah, there's a valid point. Yes.
But what you do is you change the system. You don't break the system.
But here's the thing, though. It's like when you do laws, laws are not meant to be absolute. Laws are developed to put some structure in place of something that most people think is the right decision. And so we're going
Laws
to
aren't absolute. When you have enough money, you can find ways around the laws. It's when you don't have money that the laws are pretty much strict for how they're applied to you.
Yeah, but the point of the law is to codify good, decent behavior. Is the point of the law.
So this is why I used to make the argument after the housing crisis where was it Goldman Sachs went under and all that kind of stuff. I used to make the argument that we should be able to retroactively try people for some of these activities they did, because while there may not have been a specific law against what they were doing, there was a moral behavior or an ethical behavior underneath that was broken.
Well, and it's interesting because in the law, it's definitely codified in the law. Is like there's something called the reasonable person test. Like, what would a reasonable person do in this scenario? And there's something to say for that, you know? And I guess that's why we do trials by jury, right? What would 12 of your peers, like, how do they feel about that?
Yep.
And so there's something that is codified in our system. It doesn't always work properly, but
our legal system, as screwed up as it is, has a lot of strengths to it, or a lot of things that are valuable to it. I mean,
the
sheer fact that we're not following Napoleonic law, where you're guilty till proven innocent. I mean, that's pretty.
Yeah, it's a more advanced way of doing things. Yes, exactly. As opposed to Napoleon law or whatever it is when the king says you messed up, you're dead, right?
It's your job to prove your innocence, and it's like,
well, it doesn't matter at that point. If the king says you're dead, right? There's no proving or there's no recourse, right? Take him away, kill him. We're gonna hang him. We're gonna put a show on. So yeah, I think we move forward a little bit. Well, what else, Chris?
I talked about when I talked about this, talked about that.
This thing, I'm telling you, this thing is like creating like I gotta see if this is like actually, do you think this is, because my head's kind of buzzing like I've had like two cups of coffee.
It's just element, right?
It's just element, yes.
I mean, if you had like some guarana in there or something like that that has a pretty high caffeine content, I could see maybe getting a reaction. But if it's just element,
like pure water from this container, crystal geyser, some ice, and a packet of strawberry salt.
Maybe you need to ask Kelly what she's putting in the ice.
It just comes out of that. You just hit the button and it comes out of the ice machine. Hey, speaking of that, can we change subjects? Something personal and something more interesting to talk about.
Okay.
Can we talk about refrigerators for a second?
Sure. Okay.
We're considering getting a new refrigerator because the water doesn't work, and it's 1,000 years old. The refrigerator, and it'll probably work forever. It'll probably never break. But I want ice and water in the refrigerator, filtered water. And do you know much about refrigerators by any chance?
What do you mean by do I know much? I know probably more than your average person does.
Because I've heard that basically new refrigerators are not a good deal because they're just designed to break. They just last a few years and then they break, and that's it.
Yeah, but that's been true for quite a while.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't like having ice and water in my refrigerator because there's a risk of flooding in the house when that little pipe breaks.
Yeah.
And then there's also the issue of replacing the filter on the refrigerator.
Yeah, you gotta
However
replace it
often
every
you do that.
6 months
So
or whatever.
I just use a pitcher of water, and if I need ice, I just go back to ice trays. That said, it's really hard to buy a refrigerator without an ice maker in it. So I've got an ice maker in my refrigerator. It's just not hooked up. So
Yeah. Well, I definitely want the ice maker because I love ice, and then boom, it just boom, and there you go, and it's crushed, and it's
most of the stuff on the newer refrigerators is all bells and whistles. It's all connected to the internet. It'll read the expiration dates on your food and tell you when your food's expiring. I mean, that kind of stuff.
I don't. That's another question. Hey, can we go off on another tangent? And because I'm gonna have to make a decision. I think I want to buy a new refrigerator, and apparently somebody said Labor Day or certain days are good days for sales or whatever. So maybe with this weekend. Let's talk about expiration dates on food. Can you eat something past an expiration date?
Yeah, this is a big argument in my house. I will eat food past the expiration date. My wife will not.
So how do they set that expiration date? Do you know anything about that?
Well, expiration dates are a weird thing in and of themselves, right? So they need to, I think by law you have to, even like medicine, which does not go bad, like aspirin doesn't go bad, has to have an expiration date. So they'll put an expiration date, and then in my family, it's like, oh, look, it's past the expiration date. I say, yeah, it's only 2 years old. I'm still taking the aspirin. It's fine. It's aspirin, right? I mean, that's my viewpoint on a lot of this stuff. Some stuff does lose efficacy in that sense. Food, the idea is to keep us from getting sick by going bad, right?
Yeah, right.
But so canned food, they give it a certain shelf life, but it'll go years and years after that, if before you have to eat it. And then usually like cheese has, does cheese have an expiration date? I assume it does. But then what made cheese is the mold that grows on it. So if you just cut the mold off, you can still eat the cheese. That's a stupid one. It's a requirement, and I don't know exactly how they pick the date. On there. But yeah, it's and then of course there's some things they put a best by date.
Yeah, best used by or fresh date or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like let's see, what is this? I got peanuts at Costco. Does it have a best by date on it? I don't see. Oh yeah. Best before 12/23/25.
12/23. Let's say you got a while then.
Yeah, they'll probably all be gone by the time.
Yeah,
by
exactly.
next week.
Which means Best Buy. Yeah, that's interesting. Right, so what about, okay, let's talk about chicken. Let's say you just go and you buy, because I eat a lot of chicken now. I'm trying to eat protein first sort of
Oh, we
thing.
got to follow up with turkey. I'm going to talk about turkey after that. Then. Okay.
I eat a lot of chicken breasts. And so we'll buy some chicken breasts, and usually it doesn't last a long time. Usually it's 3, 4, 5 days out max, right? So what if you, would you eat that a day after the expiry, 2 days, 3 days? I mean, or how can you tell if the chicken is edible?
So usually meats, I'll go for up to a week in the fridge before I eat them. But I will smell them, and if they smell bad, I won't eat them.
So do you do the sniff test then?
I do the sniff testing, but I also have there's a difference between something that's a little old and something that's going bad.
How can you tell? What is this? How does it smell differently? Do you know?
There's a rankness to it. When you smell yogurt, or like a probiotic, something like oh gosh, what I'm thinking of, something like that's got the microbiome growing in there.
Yeah.
There's a certain smell that you get to where it begins to just smell off. When your chicken smells like it kind of reminds you of yogurt, then I don't eat it.
It's gotta go. Yeah.
But the other thing I'll do is I'll put it in the fridge with the intention of cooking it. Like I bought some Kobe beef the other day. It's vacuum packed, so it's actually been in there 2 weeks and it still looks pretty good. It is past the expiration date, but I would eat that because it's vacuum packed. I'll open it up and smell it first to make sure. Mm-hmm. Also, obviously, if you cook it a lot, you'll kill anything in there too. And cooking it is a big part of why we're able to eat so much of the food that we've got today.
Yeah.
But I know I'll freeze it too. If I get like a huge pack of chicken, I'll freeze some of it and put it away, or I'll cook it all, because once I cook it, it'll also last about a week in the fridge. A week's my general rule for stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and plus, yeah, okay, there you go. Because I'm just.
So I gotta mention turkey. So one woman I used to work with, she used to work at Kroger, or I think it was Kroger, and she had to go and visit the turkey caves.
Oh.
And somewhere, maybe in your neck of the woods or somewhere in the middle of America, there are these underground caves, deep down, where it's really cold down there, where they store all the turkey. And they store it 2 years ahead of time. So the turkey that you get, when you buy a cheap turkey, you're getting 2-year-old turkey, stuff that was killed and frozen 2 years ago.
I have not heard about that. Oh,
And so she says, you go into this cave. It's this massive cave, and you go into it, and then that'll be like, that's the Albertsons cave. That's the that's the Kroger cave, and all these caves are set aside, and it's a storage facility for this. So obviously, when you're getting a fresh turkey, like a like a butterball or something like that, that's never been frozen, that is recent. But these ones that you get that when they go on sale for 79 cents a pound or whatever it is, those tend to be these ones that are stored in this cave. So I now have this vision of this. So actually, when Elon Musk mentioned this cave where they store all the retirement documents for the federal government, right? It was like, yeah, caves seem to be a thing for people to use. It was just in my mind. Caves, oh, great.
That's awesome. That's so good. Wow.
Oh, yeah. I did go down a rabbit hole thinking about wealth disparity this week. And I wanted to find out how much people spend today versus how much they used to spend, right?
Well,
so I went back to.
Can I pause that though? Can we can we do a I need to do a bathroom break actually. Can we just I don't know, you don't need to stop recording. I'll just cut it out later or whatever like that. But
okay, well I'll run real quick too.
Okay, I'll be back in 2 minutes, Chris. Hey.
Hey.
Okay, so you're talking about income disparity.
Yeah, it's been one of my big things recently. Actually, more so ever since we talked to Kevin about how the closer you are to the printing of money, the more value you get out of it. And it really seemed like the system is just rigged to the point where when you have lots of money and assets, you have access to the source of money and assets before everyone else does. It's like, buying into a stock before anyone else finds out about it, insider trading, all that kind of stuff. But what occurred to me was I wanted to say, is life, one of the arguments that's always made when rich people get rich is that, a rising tide raises all boats, right? So that means the poor people are getting richer too. I said, But is it about the dollars? Is it about lifespan? Is it about what is it about that rise that we can make that argument, or can we even make that argument? Is it really true? And so I went and said, how much was a house? How much is that was an average house 50 years ago, based upon someone's salary, right?
Mhm.
Average salary in America. Average
Percentages.
salary in America in 1970 was $9,000.
Okay.
The average house was $25,000. So for less than 3 years' income, you could buy a house
Yeah.
in America in 1970. That's average house. That's not California, New York, and all the expensive
average
areas.
house, yeah.
Today, it's 5.8 years,
Okay.
6 years, basically, more than twice what it was before,
Okay.
right? So then I went through and said, okay, well, let's figure out all the essentials of life. So healthcare, education, food, utilities, all that kind of stuff, right? And some of them have gone down. Food is about half of what it used to cost us because we
Mhm.
mass produce it. Now, is it not better for us, but we mass produce it, right?
Yeah.
And other things have gone up. Healthcare has gone up. So it's interesting to watch. But I said, okay, the average American in 1970, what percentage of their income was required to pay for these 7 groups of essentials?
Gotcha.
And it was like 62%.
Mhm.
And I said, and today, 82%.
Yeah.
So of the average income that someone makes in America, 50 years ago, you had 38% of your income to use for personal growth, for investment, for vacation, for whatever you wanted. Today, you've got 18%.
Right.
And so I was like, if I look at that as a number, that means that someone today, an average person today, has less options to in their life to grow their wealth, to learn, to all that stuff, because they have less money.
Well, hang on a second. That's making the assumption that they have less options of it, because you're making that assumption, I think.
You've got less money available to you. The impact you're going to be able to have. If I have 40% of my income to invest in stocks versus 20% of my income to invest in stocks, that's a big difference. There's a lot of variables you can throw. There's a lot of variables you can throw at this, and I'm willing to defend any one of them or to attack any one of
I
them.
don't disagree with that. I mean, because I think as a general, I don't train my brain to believe that. My brain says, look, I can accomplish just about anything I want if I'm willing to sacrifice enough other stuff. So I
Any
can overcome.
individual can do that. Yes, I'm talking
That's
about
what's in my head.
average. I'm talking average American. I mean average.
Yeah.
Average. I don't expect every American to optimize their income and their investment strategies and all that kind of stuff. That's not what I expect. What I expect is, what can an average person expect out of life 50 years ago and today when it comes to economic growth?
Well, and I if you're just talking averages, yeah, I can't disagree with you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, so my issue is that if that isn't addressed
Yeah.
in the next 20 years, I mean, I don't know. You know about the new Trump tax bill, right?
I've heard something bigger. I rarely watch the news, but it's big, beautiful something or whatever like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I know. Big, beautiful.
It's basically we all pay less taxes. Rich people pay less than they get a better chunk of that drop off than the average person, and then we raise the national debt, which I thought was not what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, I
To cover.
thought, yeah, he's going to raise it by $4 trillion or something. Not national debt, but the what do you call it? The spending cap.
No, I heard 5 trillion extra deficit spending over the next several years, above what was already projected. This isn't 5 trillion only. This is above the trillions that were already overspent.
Yeah, no, I got that, but it's the spending cap raised $4 trillion, I believe. The debt ceiling, I believe.
Okay, what I'd heard was 5 trillion, but okay, I don't know that specifically.
Raise the debt ceiling? Because those are different things we're talking about. One's how much.
Yeah. So what I'd heard was the debt itself over the next 10 years, because usually these things are over 10 years. They calculate.
Yeah, that would be a bigger number than the debt ceiling. But immediately, I think it's raised. Trump bill raised. Hang on, I'm going to research this.
But if Doge is saving us all this money, why do we need to do that?
I don't know. I'm not a political guy. I really am not, actually. I've decided that.
Yeah, this isn't politics. This is economy in my mind.
Economy. Yeah, okay. I guess. You know what's so funny? Maybe I should care about this. I really don't care about it. And I'll tell you why. Because I've just decided, Chris, that I'm not going to care about. Hang on, let me rephrase this. That's probably not the right language to use. I'm not going to chase something or be too concerned if I can't change it or affect it in some way. I'm only going to focus on things that I can directly control. That's kind of my personal decision.
So my thought is this. If this happens, what happens next? What happens next? How can I be prepared to survive what happens next?
Oh, I like that. Now that, like you.
So that's why you need to know. You need to know this stuff, not because it's going to save America or the middle class or whatever it is. You need to understand this stuff to understand how it's going to impact you and your family and your friends, so that you can take action to be prepared for that.
Well, now you've got my attention. Okay, yeah.
So I was having this conversation with someone the other day, and they were saying, "Oh, how do we fix income inequality in America?" I said, "Violence." I think that's what happens. I don't. The government doesn't have any money anymore because they printed all the money, everything they had, and they gave it all to everyone. Right? The rich have money. The poor don't have that much money. Every year, a large amount of money comes out of taxes and goes to the retiring people, which actually who actually are the richest generation when it comes to it, right? So basically, wealth generated at the lower income levels, at the younger levels, is not keeping up with the demand, right? So what's going to end up happening is you're going to end up with millions of people under the age of 30 who don't have a life as good as their parents did, who don't have a life as good as maybe their grandparents did.
Yeah, right.
And then yet we've got these expectations on them to pay taxes, to pay for Social Security, to pay for all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So all that stuff breaks.
Yeah,
but then not only does the structure break, when the structure breaks, you have less belief and faith in the institutions that are running that. We've already seen that we trust our institutions less than we used to. If you can't trust your institutions, and institutions includes things like policemen and firemen and court systems and all those kinds of things, suddenly you believe your ability to take action is limited, and some of those actions, the only ones that you think are going to get changed, are violence. Yeah. And so I honestly think there is going to be more violence in the next 10 years, and I don't see a way for the government to fix this without basically taking a lot of money away from rich people, which I don't see happening either. Mm-hmm. So if that's not going to happen, then we're going to have to just live through a lot of turmoil in the next 10 to 20 years. And what do we need to do to make sure, one, we survive, just be alive, and then number two, we're well off enough out of the outcome?
Well, when you say we, define we precisely.
You and me.
You and me. Okay, Chris and Scott.
You and me, and maybe whatever tribe we think we belong to.
Whatever tribe we can. Okay, all right, okay. That's a very good question, actually. And so here's what I think you need to do. You need to be aware of what's happening. But almost regardless of what is happening in the environment, Chris, not be careful. I want to be careful saying that, but almost without exception, my what I do is still going to be the same thing. I'm going to try to get as smart as I can. I'm going to learn as much as I can. I'm going to learn these fundamental skills so that I can add value to people so they'll pay me more money. That's what I'm focusing on. So for me, I'm going to focus on AI because AI is going to be a huge leverage point. I don't know how exactly, but my hunch is, I think you probably even agree with me on this, is that the more you know how to utilize AI, utilize the tool, the more options you'll have and the more valuable you'll be, is my hunch.
Yeah,
and so personally, that's what I'm going to focus on.
I think almost every job will be using AI in the future. I think what's going to happen in the short term is there'll be 10 jobs, 8 or 9 of them will be replaced by AI with one guy running all the AIs.
Yeah.
Those 8 or 9 people will be out of jobs for a while while that's happening. all your entrepreneurial people out there will be figuring out new businesses, new ideas, new products. And as they start to spin those up, they're going to need those skills. So they'll
Yeah.
start hiring those people that got fired to run their own AIs. So
Yeah.
eventually everyone's going to be doing the job of, those 10 people are going to be doing the job of 100 people, but it's still only 10 people. And the rest
Yeah.
of it will be AIs running, right? But it's
Yeah.
going to be a period of turmoil while we figure out what to do with those people.
It's going to be definitely turmoil. And that's okay, because when the environment gets tougher, people typically toughen up and get better skills. So it could be long term, it could be the greatest thing ever, right? It could be. I don't know. But just like every change in technology, some people win and some people lose,
Yeah, I think what you're having though right now is you're having a group of people who are on the bottom end of that who don't realize and don't understand how AI and all the other changes in society have impacted them. And
Well,
what's
for goodness sakes, they should be watching our podcast and then. Come on, learn a little logic, learn how to think a little bit,
I
For
I don't
goodness.
have a high expectation of the average American when it comes to that. And part of it is it's not always all on them. It's on the tools we have, right? It's on social media feeding us 30-second sound bites, and the media itself doing that for years, right? And the fact that the information we're given no longer requires us to think about it. They'll tell us the opinion we're supposed to have. And
But Chris,
all of that in
it's
combination is making it to where people who aren't inclined to think like us to begin with are going to have even a harder mountain to climb to get to think like this.
But that's what we're doing. We're serving that population. I mean, literally, you and I, Chris, Scott and Chris, in California, Oregon, could save the planet. Because if people could just stop consuming so much, put down the Netflix, put down the Taco Bell, like put it down, right? Put the joint down, put the beer down, and actually start thinking and creating in a different way. That's what will save us. And we, Chris, are leading that movement in our small little way.
Ah, I have so many butts in there that I need to bring up.
But you're not allowed to say but. Chris, but even if we can just. So already, like this podcast, just as much as we come on and babble, right? And by the way, Chris, this is our 26th episode.
Yeah.
And I could argue that this is the 27th, because I have a sleeper episode that we recorded that we've never been able to get with. So technically, this is our 27th episode.
That was a while back. I wonder how much we've changed in our thinking since then.
Yeah, we had to rush it. And probably, Chris, this is really our 50th, because we used to do this all the time and we'd never hit the record button.
Yeah, that's true. That is
We've
true.
been talking about this all along. And already I'm starting to get to be a better person, I think, because when we argue, I always stop. I'm getting a little bit less emotional, right? So my emotionalness is going down just the tiniest bit, and my thinking is going up just the tiniest bit, and saying, Chris, when you say that, what do you mean by that, right? How do you define that term? And so I think what's going to start happening is we're going to argue a little less, and we're going to start thinking a little bit more. Boom. I mean, what more do you want?
Well, I do like arguing, though.
Well, Chris, we can still argue. That's okay. We can argue all you want. But maybe we don't argue as much.
I would like our arguments to move faster, though.
Oh, we want to move faster.
Because I think we get stuck in definition, lack of definition for things, or mismatched definitions.
That's important, though, because we don't define that. We don't have the constraint.
Half the time you listen to an argument online or something where people are yelling at each other, and just because they're not talking about the same thing.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what's changing for me was when I start to listen to different people, like the Scalia thing, when I listen to Jordan Peterson. Before I used to listen as entertainment. Now I'm starting to listen as like, wait a minute, that's really good.
Are you taking notes? Do you take notes when you listen?
I don't, but I should. It's like you
should.
Me.
You should. I do take notes when I listen, and I try to go back and look up things. Right. I particularly like writing down quotes.
Okay, fair enough. I'm gonna start doing that. In fact, by the TV when I watch my YouTube, I'll make sure I have a notebook so I can at least jot it down. That's super important, right?
Yeah. I mean, to me, those the idea that comes up, like even today, well, I didn't have a note, but I mentioned that essay on AI that, is it The Machines of Loving Grace, I think is what it was called.
Yeah.
That was someone I had a conversation with some guy yesterday, and we were talking, and he just brought that up, saying that's one to read. That one gives you a kind of a positive view of how AI changes the world.
Interesting. Okay. And I think both of we got to get better at using AI because I know you said you're going to do an AI thing, and then I want to start making more money. So I'm going to start a different YouTube channel based on my company that talks mostly about, marketing and marketing automation and AI for like little small businesses and everything. Because
Yeah,
I've had a few conversations with small businesses, and not a lot of people are doing much with AI right
they're
now.
not doing anything with it, no, and most
Yeah.
of them don't really even realize what AI is,
Yeah, and
right?
the conversation I've had with people, I should probably be using it, and yeah, I go into Chat GPT a little bit and do a little something, but I don't think they're using it anywhere near its full capability right now. So hopefully, hopefully
Yeah.
we can as this podcast and as individuals, where we're trying to make some money for us personally, we can start to use some of these
Did,
tools.
did I tell you about the whole master prompt? Did I talk about that?
No.
So I was watching one of the AI channels, and this guy he uses Claude, and he creates
Okay.
he calls a master prompt for a business. So
Yeah.
he's got multiple businesses. They're all small businesses. I don't know, like 5 people, 10 people. I don't know what the size
Yeah.
is, but he basically creates the operating plans, the SOPs for his entire company in one document, and he calls it the master prompt.
That's
So he's
awesome.
got flowcharts in there. He's got the names of the officers in there. He's got who's got responsible for what their dollar limits are for spending. He's got all that stuff defined in a basically 40-page document. And
Beautiful.
he goes into Claude, and he loads it up and says, this is who you are. You are my computer system to run my business. And at
Yeah.
that point, it does everything. So it's like we need to hire a new guy. It kicks off the hiring process, and it goes through
Beautiful.
everything that needs to do. So he's basically created the entire operating plan using that. And so instead of having all this, HR software and all that other kind of stuff, he's
Yeah.
doing it through this. Now, of
That's
course,
beautiful.
there's some privacy issues in my mind. So obviously, if you got
Okay.
to be a big enough company, you'd have to worry about that. But at a small level, I could see any small company. First of all, they need to sit down and document their process because most small companies have not bothered to document stuff. It's all
Yes,
in the
right.
guy's head.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
in and of itself will give you a huge benefit to be able to
Yeah.
train other people to scale and to grow. But it would also give you the ability to see your own process written down and go, well, that's dumb. I'm going to
Yeah,
change that,
that's dumb when you
right?
actually see
And
it.
so you get some process improvement out of it. Then you
Yeah,
bring in someone whose job is just to look and make process improvement, and they're going to go, yeah, let's fix this, let's fix this. Once you've
yeah,
got all that down, you can say, here's my process. I got these 5 steps, and here's the 10 tasks that I do in these 5 steps. You start
yes,
looking at the tasks going, I can automate this. I can send this one out to Notebook, Notebook LM, or to ChatGPT. I can use a different AI agent for this. And you start going through all these tasks. And
yeah,
eventually you start saying, okay, I do this, this, and this. And then you go,
yeah,
wait, why can't I just chain all those together? And you chain them all together through an AI automation tool.
yeah,
And suddenly you've automated your process. But the
yeah,
first thing you got to do is know your process,
yes,
optimize it, and then automate it.
yes,
not
correct.
not rocket science, but people rarely either have the time or have the thought process to go through that
Yeah,
effort.
yeah, because it's work. Because people don't want to think. People typically just, oh, we'll just wing it. We'll figure it out. I'm good enough to solve it. And a lot of people are, but you're not optimized for sure, right?
No. This is why,
I mean,
to me, this is fun to sit there and take something and optimize it.
I
That's
think it's,
fun.
I think it's great. And I think there's millions of companies out there that are going to need our help in doing that. Just the thinking process is so helpful. So yeah, I think this is awesome. So this is how we, if we get off our ass and actually go do the work instead of just talking about it, can make money to improve our families for the long term.
Did you start going through and develop any tools for Logic
Just
Flow
a
or
little
for?
bit. I've thought about it, Chris. I've thought about it, but I haven't done any work yet. But I'll tell you what. Since you put me on the spot, next Friday when we do our podcast, if we do our podcast, then I will made some forward progress, and then I'll tell you what I've done.
Okay.
I'm
I
gonna
would
do
really
some.
like us to look at a framework of some type for one aspect of this, come to some kind of an agreement on it, and actually turn it into a deliverable.
Okay, let's do it. When do you want to do that? Actually. How about let's meet on Monday and let's crank that
Okay.
thing out. Let's just take
We
an
could-
hour and let's just end it. And this is good. Let's just say that by the end of this hour, we're going to ship whatever we come up with.
You got to time bound it. Okay, sure.
Yeah. And I know, of course, it's not going to be perfect. Of course, it's going to be, we're going to make a million changes. But hey, man, at least we hit the record button. We did something, right?
Are we going to record the process?
I think that'd be cool. I mean, let's do it. What the heck?
Okay.
Yeah, let's, yeah.
I mean,
I think
I've got
that's-
stuff. I've got stuff I've already created in chat that we can use as for stuff.
Okay.
What do you have a specific area you want us to concentrate on?
I could care less. I just, basically, in fact, we wrote a lot of things down. I think it'd take me just 15 minutes to summarize it, and then we can make it look pretty after. But just a few questions to ask yourself when you want to think through something clearly, actually. And just like a couple things off the top of my head is, let's go to the extremes in certain cases. That just to see, does it still work out here on the edges, right? Because I know if it works on the edges, it'll certainly work for sure in the 80%, right? I know I've got a high level of confidence. I want people to think in terms of, sorry, what do you call it? Spectrum. Not just think in terms of black and white, but thinking like, how true is this, or how sure am I of this particular?
That's the first thing I usually ask myself is, do I believe this?
Yeah, or how much do you believe it?
Well, usually my first question is, do I believe this? And
Do I
then my
believe it?
second
Okay.
question is, how much do I believe this and why?
Yeah, there you go.
And when I get to why, it's like it's a gut feeling. Okay, then I recognize it's a gut feeling. I don't have any evidence for it, or it's
Yeah.
like, oh, because I know these things and these things contradict what they just said.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And
Yeah.
you know what we're gonna make, Chris? We're making like jujitsu for the mind. We're gonna put together an organized thought process so that in fact, I'm gonna guarantee that if you use our thought process, you're almost certainly gonna come up with a better decision than if you don't use it.
Okay, I think
Almost
that's
sure.
fair to say.
Because
Yeah.
you're just thinking, and it doesn't have to be our thought process. I mean, you got to realize we're not making this stuff up. All we're doing is taking the work people have done for maybe hundreds or thousands of years before us and just turning into a one-page, easy to digest document.
Well, and the one thing we always are going to recognize is we do not all value the same information the same way.
No.
So that means that you and I can have the same information to start with and come up with different conclusions because of how we value that information.
Yeah. And in your case, what I would recommend for you is you give less information because you can overwhelm. Just give just enough to get them started, and then if they want to come back, they can come back for seconds.
What I find is when I try to ask a question to prompt a thought,
Yeah.
and if I don't give more context, people feel like I'm trying to hedge them in or get a gotcha on them.
But we're not trying to trick anybody. We're just trying to give people tools that they
I'm not
can
trying
go
to
use.
trick anybody. So my thought when I'm drilling into a topic, right? So if I'm going through Chat GPT, it's easy because it chat responds and it doesn't care if I get angry at it.
Yeah.
Whereas a person, when I'm trying to ask, why do you believe that? I want to know why you believe that. So I might ask outright, why do you believe that? quite
No,
often-
you can't. Chris, you can't listen. You
Well,
can't.
and
do that.
quite often that's a hard question for people to answer because it goes, so where does that thinking come from, or what
No.
well, how do you get then Scott? How do you get to the
Okay,
core?
that's a good question. That's right, because those questions are insulting, and it feels like they're being interrogated. So you can ask those, but in fact, maybe what we should do
Well,
is we should
Tell
write
me,
those questions down.
tell me what you think that, or tell me more, right? Or tell me, give me some background on that.
Yeah, see, that's good. Hey, give me some background. Or say that's a really good idea. How did you get there? That's like really cool. I'd like to learn about that. I mean, I think you're getting to the same question, but you just have to frame it in a way that's palatable for them. Put a little sugar on it.
Mhm.
And I think that's important. It's like the negotiating guy, man. He is so good at that, right? He's a
boss.
genius. Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's
no,
the tonality, it's the speed, it's the tone, everything
so
matters.
I think him and I told you that lawyer guy, Fisher, what's his name? I forgot his name. Um, he he's the guy who says, did you mean to be insulting,
Yeah,
or
those are
what do you want me to do with that?
yeah. What do you want me
Or
to do with that?
you know,
But think, Chris,
how do you want me to respond?
yeah, but think about what's happening there is now what we're doing is one of our key things we didn't even mention at this point, up to this point, is the fact that I want you to bring the emotion down a little bit and bring the thought process up a little bit. So instead of just jumping to the conclusion, they're like, hey, what did he mean by that? Or, you know, that is a beautiful question. And the guy may come back and said, yeah, you're a this, and you're okay, at least we're clear, right? On where we are. And yeah, he may
Well,
come back and say, yeah, man, I had a bad day. I got to fight with my wife. Sorry about
someone
that.
who wants to insult you and is willing to say they want to insult you, at least they're honest and you understand, and then you can control your response.
You can control your response,
Oh,
right?
you want to piss me off? Huh, then I'm not going to get pissed off.
Yeah, because you have a set of tools. And it's like you may want to take a swing at me. You may want to attack me. It's like, okay, fine. I need to go from logic. Now I go to jujitsu. Now I have this whole set of techniques, right? But in no case do I get emotional.
I
Never,
got
never.
upset last week. I kind of blew up. We were having a conversation in the family, and I got upset with the way that my wife and my daughter were reacting to my conversation.
Oh, so wait, hang on. So they didn't react the way you wanted them, so you got pissed off.
I got pissed off.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
song my daughter was playing on the piano, and it's a song that her choir group sang, and it sounds a lot like the old political songs of the '60s. We shall overcome, we shall overcome. That song, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the melody sounded like that, and I wasn't hitting the notes right. So they go, "No, that's not it. No, that's not it. No, that's not it." And I'm like, and honestly, the tone came across that way to me, like, "No, that's not it. No, that's not it." I'm like, I'm trying to have a conversation here. You're not even letting me get to the point where to try to get to the melody. And so I blew up. I said, "Okay, then I just wouldn't say anything anymore to you." That
Oh,
was it.
no. You took it all the way to the extreme.
Yep.
And they're like,
So,
okay,
but
come
but
back here,
but
sing
the
this
point
song.
was, I was trying to engage in a conversation, and I felt like they were just shutting it down. I
Yeah.
wasn't even able to complete my sentence or phrase before I was being shut down.
Because maybe they didn't like what you were saying, actually.
I think they were coming from a bias where no, it's not that song, and so they just immediately attacked this idea that this song could have been the same melody, which
Oh my God.
often songs are pulled from old church hymns and old classical music. I mean, they're pulled from all over the place.
You know what this means to me, Chris? And I do need to go in a couple of minutes, actually. But you know what this means? Is that you didn't present what you're trying to do in a way that connected to them. You were on a different frequency, which I think these are other skills that we've got to talk about. Is that just because this is how you process data, you can't deliver that message in your message. You've got to understand how they want to communicate, and you've got to translate to them in a way that they'll be like, oh
I
yeah,
need to
that's
translate, and the number one thing I need to learn to do is to be more patient.
more
I
patient.
expect people to be responsive in a conversation at a certain cognitive level, at a certain participation level, that is not always the case. You know how much I want to pull out my hair when I listen to people talk slowly? I listen to YouTube at double speed. I listen to Spotify, not songs, but I listen to like podcasts at double, even triple speed. I will listen to books at double and triple speed.
Dude, you may need to just slow down a little bit.
Life's too short. I need to fill my brain with information so I can create more.
That is awesome. Okay, so create. Okay, so listen, let's do this because I really want to go now, actually. What are you going to create? What's the next thing that you're going to create?
So
Remember, we used to do this.
I was working on this critical thinking breakdown. What are the things that you need for critical thinking? And what I was really trying to do was how to get someone to overcome. I get you don't like the word biological response, but the emotional / physical response that occurs to someone that gets in the way of their thinking. So I
Well,
want
that's
I
the
want you to
biological response is fine. Yeah,
yeah.
it's just it's
So I
causing
want
the
to I want to figure out some way. And so one of them was that 90-second rule. The other one was that emotional toolkit, I think,
oh
or
yeah,
first aid kit.
yeah,
Yeah, another one is the spotlight effect. Realize that you think that you're the center of the universe, but other people don't.
yeah,
All those types of things. And
yeah.
so it was like it was a series of things to consider when you feel some negative impact on you.
That's beautiful. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So I'll
Even
work on that.
even with all yeah, even just simple as just take a deep breath, right? Well,
Yeah.
that's helpful.
Well, you used to say count to 10, right?
Count
But
to 10. That's good too.
and I think that fits with what Andrew was talking about with us earlier today about, let your brain catch up with your emotions.
Yeah, 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 yep,
And then
yep,
there's the
yep,
90-second
yep.
rule with don't make any decisions for 90 seconds so your body can recover from whatever stimulus it had, whatever
Yeah, yeah,
hormone reaction you were having,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Your hormones.
So
Yeah, you have your
so
hormones.
like when I was getting pissed off at my family, that was an immediate reaction. Had I either waited 10 seconds for
Yeah,
my brain to catch up, or I just waited 90 seconds for that that feeling to go away, right? So
yeah. That's
that's an interesting
fascinating.
thought. Maybe the feeling takes 90 seconds to go away, but the brain takes 10 seconds to be able to catch. So the feelings are running over here. They're doing a 100-yard dash, and
Yeah.
your brain has to chase after your feelings, and
Yes.
it takes it
Yes.
10 seconds to catch up. That's why you count
Right.
to 10 or 5 or whatever your number
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. I
And
think that's so funny.
at least that means your brain is trying to keep up with your feelings. And
Yes.
if you can't wait the 90 seconds, then your brain can take over from your feelings.
Yeah. And that's a big thing of jujitsu that literally it's like you learn it in your body is they teach you techniques and things to do so you don't get overwhelmed. And the intention of this whole thing is whatever technique you want to use is fine. But the point is you got to slow things down. That's the big lesson. And there's a million ways to do that. Take 10 breaths, breathe, whatever. Yeah. Yeah. That's the big idea, actually. But you learn techniques to slow things down. And they tell you, okay, your heart rate's going crazy, right? You're burning all this energy. It's like you're gonna they call it gas out, right? You're only gonna have another 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds, depending on what kind of shape you're in. So you've got to manage that energy so carefully. And that's what jujitsu teaches you. So this is awesome. This is what you're doing. You know what you could do. It'd be awesome, Chris. Is ask your family to help you with that. They're like, hey, next time I like do that thing, and they'll be like, oh, they'll have a name for it, right?
It doesn't happen that often, but yes, I
Okay,
think
but
probably.
but they'll know what you're talking about, right? And she'll like, oh yeah, it's like just give me a countdown, 1, 2, just anything. That's love, man. That's love. And see,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, if you have a really good wife, which my guess is you probably do, she'll be like, awesome. I would be glad to help you with that.
We'll see. I'll bounce the idea off
Okay,
because I
bounce it
know
off and then let me
because
know that's your
my
homework.
daughter needs the same thing because she's going through she's teenager, so she's going through all the emotions
Oh,
that a
she's got like
teenager
a
goes through.
thousand times more hormones than
And
we do.
so sometimes she'll break into crying and not know why.
Yeah, that's a common one. That's very common.
Right.
So,
So being
yeah,
able to work with her through that would be give her tools to be able to
tools to do that. Yeah,
yeah.
that's like really good. Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, so what am I gonna do, Chris? Um, what are we gonna
You
do?
are going to teach everyone how to use logic.
Listen, I'm gonna do my homework. When do you want to meet? Like sometime Monday or something, or pretty
Um,
much any time is fine. You just tell me, shoot me a text or something when it's good for you.
so Monday's a holiday. Are you okay?
Yeah, that's kind of why I picked it actually. Yeah,
Let's see. I don't think I'm doing anything special. Let me find out and make sure that there's nothing going on with the family, but I don't think there is.
that's good. Just
Um,
whenever, and then we take maybe at 60 minutes, 90 seconds, and let's do a working meeting where we're actually like working on it.
okay. Yeah. But I
And
think
then and then
and
and
the
we just
goal is to have what, an infographic, little chart or something at the end.
something. I mean, yeah, whatever. If we can, I mean, I think for me the most important thing would be is to get the points down and clear and like, argue over the precision of the language and get the language as precise as we can. I think turning it individually, that should be pretty easy.
We don't have our website up yet, right?
No, but I could make one.
Well,
Let me do that.
I'm just thinking. Let's park so we can park it somewhere. So whatever we produce,
Okay.
we should need to park it somewhere.
That's my homework then. Before the Monday thing, I'll have. It won't be much, but at least the skeleton will be up.
You can have a landing page and then a place to put that chart. That's it.
Okay, I don't even know if I'll give you that much, but I'll do it on Monday. But before Monday, I'll like make the website.
Or if you just have like a scroll down blog where you can just stuff. We'll just stuff the documents there, whatever we generate there.
Okay, yeah, sure, that sounds good. And we can always reformat later, but at least we'll have a landing page. We'll call it something like handsonlogos.com/, we'll give it a name or something.
Critical thinking framework, tools, or
framework.
tools.
Something like it.
Just tools.
Tools. Love it. Okay. That's it. That's my task. There we go.
All righty.
We got our tasks. All right.
I'll text you a time later then.
Okay, sounds good, Chris. See ya.
All right, let me hit stop here. Boom.